My name is Dr. Rick Seguil.
And action. Hey, Jay had a... This is Kirk again. And action. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Rick. Lourdes had a question about a water-only fast. So, water-only fasting essentially is fasting or not eating anything greater than 24 hours. Now, she stumbled upon that during one day. She already does I believe it's a 16-hour fast, or is it an 18-hour fast? I think she essentially eats one meal a day. And she was able, and she's my only patient that has been able to continue that through the years I've been in this practice. And I admire that. I couldn't do it. There are some people who can do OMAD, one meal a day, but anyway, she was able to get past that 1 or 2 days into almost 27 hours and felt good. So I think that says something about the individual as far as being well-rounded and grounded and almost bulletproof. But I don't think that my average person can do that. Now, that doesn't mean it's not wrong. I mean, it's unhealthy. I think that if you look at Walter Longo's information, longevity diet. I'm in my 5th day, so I'm going to talk about this too. So I'm going to talk about both and why I think water-only fasting for a prolonged amount of time is a possibility, but I would get the benefits from this more so. So I'm on my 5th day of the fasting mimicking diet, and let me tell you, right after you subscribe down below and hit the alert button to find out when I do new videos. So I'm on my 5th day. And yesterday, I've been posting on Facebook. I was a little bit tired. Able to take on a full clinic, problem solve, all that stuff, even work out a little bit. Today, the 5th day, Friday, I don't have clinic hours. I stayed as hydrated as possible. But hitting the gym with my usual 15 minutes of hell, I couldn't. And I felt myself really struggling. So I had to lower the weight. I had to go lower intensity. I couldn't even tolerate the fast heart rate. Usually I like to crank up my heart rate to 160. Couldn't do it. I just felt essentially hitting the wall or bonking. Now, that is, and I've talked about that in my other videos. Check out Keto Flu and the other one I did. But that's okay. But that is also why I would say the FMD, or fasting mimicking diet, is probably a more long-term practice. So there are some places in California that do water only for sometimes 30 days under direct supervision in a center. I don't remember the name of the place. That just sounds so extreme. But the outcomes are supposedly good. I haven't seen big data coming out of that place, but outcomes are good for animals. That's what Longo did before he presented his information to chemotherapy patients and oncologists. As he says in his book, he couldn't get a study with chemotherapy patients or oncologists because none of them wanted to do a water-only fast. I mean, they're already suffering, and they imagine somebody already suffering, going through chemotherapy, and then you're going to tell them don't eat. So it was a deal breaker. And then the oncologists didn't want to go into that because it might upset their protocols. So through trial and error, I believe he came up with this. And I just shortcutted that whole story, but you should get his book. Really good book, a little bit scientific, but also at the same time there are sections here that are pretty cool about Italy and his growing up, or his journey. So would I do a water-only fast? Maybe. Not if I am starting out an exercise routine. Not if I'm, say, an accountant and it's tax day. Not if I have to take boards or big tests, or if there's a challenging, say, a flight across country or out of the country. I wouldn't do it then, because one of the things you might run into with strict caloric restriction is the immune system can be compromised. So usually when you and a lot of animals will hibernate. They'll get really big and then they'll starve for a season. And I think that most animals on Earth, most life forms on Earth are used to that because of the way the Earth tilts, and then the season of bounty and the season of famine. So I think that I'm thinking there must be a little bit of a gene or an epigenetic snip that when triggered with starvation, it gets rid of all the half-assed cells. So if you have a whole bunch of cells that are supposed to do their job, whether it's glands or brain function or heart muscle or skeleton, digestive, all of your cells are supposed to do their job. Sometimes in abundance, like with the average body weight in the United States and the waistline in the United States, with abundance and eating all day long, you might have a propensity to have disease. Diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, heart attacks, Alzheimer's, so strokes and heart attacks. The objective it would be, can we relate obesity and overeating to all those diseases? And I think there's enough data that says there's a possibility. And if we can get to the point where the starvation is felt by a few cells, or if not all the cells of the body, then something I believe is shaken up. Now I have to go through his studies in detail to find out if there is what the gene is. I believe he found a gene, I can't remember what it was. But if there is, how do we as humans turn it on? And that would usually mean, how do you turn stem cells on? So if you have something where your thyroid poops out, like Hashimoto's, it's not there after a while, or your testicles fail, or your eyeball fails, or say something really easy, your cartilage is torn or worn down. There's things called stem cells that you can get out of your bone marrow, put in a lab, grow them, and put them back in to places that you want, like the knee if you're trying to get new cartilage formed, or the colon lining, the small intestine lining in Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. So there are scenarios like that, but you have to harvest and you have to grow your own stem cells. Aside from that, there is two other times when you can have stem cell growth to fix things. One is when you're born, and that's when stem cells are super active. And then another is during the refeed phase of this FMD, this 5-day fast. Now I think you have to go through at least 3 cycles of this, so 5 days a month for 3 months. And then suddenly, during the refeed phase, you'll see stem cells proliferate. And that can fix a lot of things. Not only will you see that, so the bottom line with stem cells is you can rebuild tissue that's destroyed. Say you're a diabetic and you don't have any more beta cells. So those are the ones that create, just think of the pancreas as having cells that creates insulin and glucagon, and they balance each other out, but sometimes they get screwed up. Well, sometimes by throwing this practice in, you can reset everything and grow these beta cells again. You can actually shrink a fatty liver. You can, I don't know if he found the information to shrink an enlarged heart, but the idea is when a body is triggered that it's in starvation, it becomes very efficient. So it gets rid of all the half-assed cells. So if you have a cancer cell, for example, and that's where I was going to lead to, not only with your immune system, not only with organ dysfunction, but cancer. If you have a cancer cell that's deciding to take over and not listening to the usual rules and regulations of the body, and it starts to eat everything around it, it starts to invade, it starts to push, then usually that will kill an average person. Chemotherapy is there to destroy that cell, but chemotherapy unfortunately has a side effect that destroys every cell in your body and you might die. So you have to dial that in, dial that down. Well, he found with the cancers at UCLA during the study that the fasting mimicking diet can also do the same thing. That's just food and manipulation of food to do the same thing as chemotherapy. But they also throw logarithmically, if you combine both chemotherapy and fasting mimicking diet, really improved outcome with cancer survivors. So I think there is something to be said that when you have a diet practice that almost mimics, if not improves, a cancer protocol, why not? That means there's a lot of power in that. But unfortunately, Big Pharma can't patent food and can't patent a protocol for eating, so there's not that much investment as far as NIH. NIH has a little bit of allotment for supplement and food industry, but a minimal amount of that, and a smaller amount of that goes into just dietary changes. So I think there's something to be said with his information. And now, not only is he finding that if you starve a cell, and it's not like a total water fast like Lourdes is doing. Lourdes is water only, nothing else, no food, no calories, no fuel. And I think that's why it's very hard to get back to Lourdes. It's very hard for my average patient to do that. It's very hard for my average patient to eat just 8 hours a day. So let alone 24 to 72 hours of not eating to a week of not eating and just having water. So I think if you can do it, cool. But now I'm talking about longevity and or sustainability. My average person, I would always say, try this. Now there's people who do keto, there's people who do intermittent fasting like Jason Fung, or restricted time feeding. So whatever you want to call it, the data for this is so robust and it's pouring out because of what he puts into the Prolon box. Prolon, I have a video for that, so check it out. Prolon, if you don't know how to pick up your foods or cook your foods or figure out how to read a nutrition label and calculate your 1,000 calories on day 1 and your 750 calories on day 2 to 5, then you can buy the box. The box is a little expensive, but it's worth it because everything is there to make it through the 5 days. And it's exact. You don't have to worry about counting. And you just do that 5 days and you're done. Now, if you can do it on your own, great. His studies were based on a vegetarian or pescatarian diet. So when he goes down into, I think it's 45, 10% protein, 45% fat and carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are mostly vegetables and legumes. So they're healthy carbs, low glycemic index. And I know some of the keto guys probably just turned this off, but here's a good thing. He is now, he has ongoing studies pulling in ketosis as a possible also modification to the FMD. So in the next 2 years, I think he's going to come out with more information. So as long as he doesn't have, I think what I got out of the book was, as long as there's a practice and a protocol and there's no downside, do it. Water fasting could be a problem, but again, sustainability is tough. Ketosis, if you're keto adapted, could be a problem, very limited, but you will hear of people who pass out. And I'm not sure ketosis is good for older individuals, especially people who have osteoporosis and already have sarcopenia. Younger, for sure. So, and that's why I think he limits his protein to 10%, which comes out to like 70 grams, average American, which is not too bad. And that's the only apprehension I have because I like protein. I embrace protein and the information out of McMaster University and University of Illinois as far as 100 grams or 1.2 grams per kilo at least per day. So I like to push protein. I'm vegan, so I'm all plant-based, but I like to push the amount of protein. And the thinking is that when you do the 5 days, you get rid of all the senescent cells, you get rid of all the crappy cells, you start to shrink fatty livers, and you start to pull calories out of your visceral fat without necessarily taking it out of the subcutaneous fat, all visceral, which is really hard. Most diets will take it out of here, but you'll keep this as a last resort. It's hardest to get that fat out of the visceral, but it does it. In fact, he showed more visceral fat eating, if you want to call it, than subcutaneous, which is another positive. I mean, how can you... There's no pill that will give you a targeted fat loss. There's no exercise that will give you a targeted fat loss. This practice targets fat more from the visceral than the adipose tissue from your subcutaneous area. So another positive. So I can't praise this enough. I was very apprehensive on doing this. And the only reason I did this is because my friend and patient Pat wanted to do it. So I said, what the hell. I actually have 2 Prolon boxes, but I wanted to try a whole food approach first. And this is my 5th day. So I'd say, Lourdes, if you are thinking about it, go for it. Just make sure you're balanced. Just make sure you don't overexert. I would always try to get more resistance training in. I'm just preferential to resistance more so than walking and running. I think resistance training and taking those type 1 fibers are good for walking and running and biking and swimming. But I think type 2A and type 2B or X are more appropriate for fat breaking, cholesterol control and glucose control, which is the name of the game for me, for my patients. In addition, when you do have muscle that's well tuned and your lactic acid tolerance is fairly good, you'll be able to get through the 5th day. And like I said, I had to tone down everything. I still made it through 15 minutes, but no way, I didn't even break a sweat. But I was really gassed out. And and the other positive, I haven't hit 140 pounds tomorrow after I finish the 5th day. I'm hoping to break below 140. I haven't done that for 15 years. And I don't feel like I'm emaciated. I still have my power. In fact, tomorrow, the next day, and next week, I'm going to be pushing the amount of weight and the intensity as I start to refeed. And that is one caveat too. If you're going to try this 5-day fast, and you do it maybe whether it's the Prolon box or you do it on your own with whole food, be careful about the urge to binge on the 6th day, 7th day, because that is when, after starvation, when the fuel sources come back in, stem cells take off. So the stem cells are the things that will reverse Crohn's disease, that will take care of those antibodies that are attacking you if you're an MS sufferer or you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis where you're attacking your own thyroid. That's when the cells, those lymphoid cells, will calm down and be more focused. So, and then again, that's an extrapolation from the cancer information. But if your stem cells improve, then they can usually create more white blood cells to attack. Number 1, to attack cancer. Number 2, to leave good cells alone. And what other medicine do you know of, or chemotherapy do you know of, that will only attack one type of cell and leave everything else alone? Impossible. And that's where I can't speak more about this thing. Now that I've tried it, I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to do it 3 months in a row like his protocol is. And I'll see how I do, and I'll probably space it out 3 times a year, which is also a suggestion. Now, there's other people who try to get more aggressive. I think if you're trying to lose weight and you can tolerate it, you can do it every month if you wanted to. There's nothing wrong with it. Just, again, don't refeed with crappy food and alcohol and sugar. You just blew that. All you were working for the 5 days might be blown. But another positive, as he states in his book, is most people who do it don't have the urge to go back to the crap. They voluntarily stay away. So there's a trigger in the brain that is also hit. And maybe that's because glial cells start to work better and there's less inflammation in the brain. Who knows? But the decision making is proper, cravings are less, energy is profound, and cell responsiveness is excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing what it does with muscle cell and endurance, but and in the end, after the 3 cycles, I'll compare and see how I do with cognitive function as well. So, Lourdes, if you're ready for it, you can continue as long as we get you a little bit more resistance adapted. The water fast is fine. I just have to tell you to limit it to a certain amount of time and stick to that time. If at any point in time we feel sick, that's it. But if you're interested, try this. I'll be doing this again July 5th. So we'll hit it again, but I'm going to use the box next time, and I'll produce that video as well. For all of you who are on the fence with fasting mimicking diet or any kind of diet fad, I would try this. It's not that hard. And that's the other thing. As a vegan, I have to take extra protein powder, which I couldn't do in the last 5 days because it's very dense and it accounts for a lot of calories. I wanted more volume. But when you're taking in the amounts of proteins and fats and carbohydrates, you do have to be picky about what you indulge. I see a lot of boards for a fasting mimicking diet, and there's a large amount of people doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, getting back into protein, doing a keto version of it, and that's fine. But if you want the true value, follow this book and check out my video on Prolon, and hopefully you'll find the same results. If you have found positives your way, please post them down below. I'd like to hear about them.